Hey folks, it's Ray at DCRainmaker.com here, and today I've got 9 new things to know about the brand new Polar X Pro. Now technically this is the Polar X Pro Titan, which means it has a titanium case that's 12% lighter and has a fancy leather band, all that kind of stuff. And the pricing for these starts at $499 for the base and $599 for the Titan edition. Now in this video, I'm going to dive into the 9 new features, the biggest new features of this watch, as well as go into accuracy. And then later on in the video, I'm going to talk about which of those features are coming to the existing Grit X that we have right there, as well as the Polar Vantage V2, because essentially this makes this like the top dog Polar watch. And so it's interesting to talk about which features are going where and kind of the vision going forward. Okay, so with that, the very first feature on the list is a new routing profile screen, which allows you to see both the breadcrumb trail and the route profile from an elevation standpoint once you select a route. So the way that works is you tap into choosing a sport mode, and then once your sport mode is chosen, up in the left-hand corner, you've got the little icon for settings. Scroll on down to routes just like before, and choose a route just like before. At this point, it's going to plot that route. And if you scroll on down a little bit more, you will go ahead and see a breadcrumb trail of that route. So I start at one spot and go to a different spot over here, and then go on down. You can see the elevation profile for that route. And then as well, they've changed how they do this. You can add your reminders for hydration and nutrition, or nutrition and hydration right there. Once that is done, once you've got what you want, you just simply tap start, and you can choose whether to load from the start point or the midpoint. The midpoint's useful if you're changing routes midway through, which we'll get to in just a second. So we'll choose start point here, and then we go off and begin our route. And of course, this handily gets to the next new feature, which is the new in workout or in activity elevation profile chart. So you can see your elevation profile right there. And you'll see in green text at the bottom there, it lists your total elevation gain coming up and then total elevation descent coming up. In this case, this is in meters for my particular watch. And you can see the elevation profile. And then as you go through this particular workout or this particular route, it'll show your dot moving across that and then kind of gray out the section you've already done. Now, I will say this has been a little bit hit or miss for me in whether or not it grays out that elevation profile. In some cases, it just simply shows this thing the entire time. In other cases, like when I reverse the route, it did properly start to gray out the portions that I've already done and show my dot along that profile. My guess is there's probably sort of some nuances to the route source. I've been mostly using Commute, but when I reverse the route, I use Polar's built-in stuff, which means that it's probably pulling from a different source. Either way, hopefully that's just some like minor teething pains that get sorted out pretty quickly. Now for this next item here, I bundled a bunch of routing stuff into one like routing extravaganza bullet. This could be like 4 bullets, but I didn't want to have like 20 new things. I just wanted like 9 new things. So what you got here is number 1, you can change routes midway through a activity, which you previously couldn't do. So the way this works is in the middle of my route, I just go ahead and I choose from the breadcrumb trail, this right-hand button right there. And then I can choose to end route guidance, and that'll end the route guidance right then and there. And then from there, I can pause the route, and then go in the upper left-hand corner right here and choose from the settings menu and choose a new route just like before. The same kind of features there work. But let's say I didn't want to end the route. Let's say I want to do something else. You've now got the option to reverse the route, which means it'll reverse the planned route. So that means it'll take wherever you are on that route and reverse it back to the start. There's also the ability to go ahead and track back to the start how you got there. So let's say you chose a different direction, you went around like a lake or something different than your planned route, then you'd use that so you wouldn't run the same way you came back in. And then there's the ability to go beeline, which means just ignore everything else and just go straight there as the compass or as the crow flies, the bee flies, back to the beginning. So you've now got like 3 options for routing back to the starting point, as well as the ability to cancel the route and choose any other route that you want. And within all of those, you will still get that route elevation profile because you're choosing what is effectively a known route to the system where it has that elevation data in it. Speaking of well-known things, it is well known that if you go and whack that like button at the bottom right now or hit subscribe or do both, it really does go ahead and help out this video and the channel quite a bit, and I really do appreciate it. The next feature is the new music control. This is something that Polar added on some of their other watches this past spring, I think even last year as well for a few others. It allows you to control music on your phone. So the way this works, you can do it from both a workout or just from the general dashboard view. You've got a new music control dashboard view. You can tap into this right now and you can see what's going on. So bring my phone over here. I've got Spotify pulled up. You'll see the Spotify icon. Let me slide this over. There we go. Spotify icon in the top corner right there. Reduce the brightness so it's not so crazy out of brightness there. And then I've got the ability to change it. I can pause it. I can go ahead and choose my volume level. So I can do this right there. I can increase the volume. There we go. Don't want to get myself YouTube flagged, so I'll back out of that. Go back in the music. I can go ahead and skip tracks to something else. There we go. And I can pause that track there as well. And this works for actually any media on my phone. So it works for YouTube, it works for whatever you want. It just controls the music on your phone. There is no music storage on the Polar Grit X Pro or Pro Titan or any of the Polar watches except the M600, which you don't want to buy at this point, but that's the only one that actually has music storage on it. So distractions aside, there are two new dashboard views that we bundled together in this next item. There's a new daylight view that you see right there. Allows you to see the dusk, dawn, and daylight. Let me just tap the brightness back on again. The portions of the day that are dark, portions of the day that are light. You can then tap into that to go ahead and see your sunset and dusk time periods, as well as tomorrow's dawn and sunrise time periods, and then how many daylight hours you have in the day. So 11 hours and 19 minutes today for my daylight. Maybe that's for tomorrow. Either way, it's good amount of daylight. I like it. Next, you've got another dashboard view that has your altimeter and compass and GPS coordinates in it. So on the main watch face view, you can see your current altimeter and the compass, and you can rotate that around. It's a magnetic compass, so it'll do exactly what you expect from a magnetic compass. And then if you tap into that, you can scroll down and see your altitude over the last 6 hours. I don't have a lot of altitude here, so what you're seeing right now isn't like wrong. It's just I'm only going up like a meter or two, so it's going to kind of look a little bit blocky, which is fine. And then you can calibrate your altimeter right there if you want to. You can scroll down; it'll show you the last known GPS location, and you can refresh that right then and there, and the coordinates for that. And you go down again, you've got your compass. You can also lock the compass as well as calibrate the compass right there. So it's like one handy dandy altimeter, compass, and GPS coordinate spot in one single dashboard. Next, there's a new heart rate sharing or heart rate broadcasting feature. This allows you to take your heart rate as measured by the optical heart rate sensor on the back right there and broadcast it out to third-party apps. The way this works is once in a sport mode menu, like indoor cycling, for example, with Zwift or Trainer Road or whatever you want, click the upper left-hand button, and then from there, scroll on down to share heart rate with other devices, tap into that, tap add a new device, go onto that app or that device, and then search for it within the app. You're searching for a Bluetooth smart heart rate sensor, and then it'll pair with that. And then from there, you back out of that menu to the main screen, and you're now broadcasting your heart rate to that app. I used it last night, for example, in Zwift to broadcast my heart rate from this watch to Zwift. No real problems at all. One like little quirk at the very beginning and very end where they didn't quite match perfectly, but for the rest of the workout, it was just fine. Speaking of those tests, they've now been added to the Grit X Pro. Just simply tap this little left-hand button and you get into the test menu. And then from there, you've got the orthostatic test, which has been added, the leg recovery test, the cycling test, and the running test. It previously just had the fitness test. So the running test is essentially a VO2 max test. So you're going to run as hard as you can, faster and faster until you pretty much die. The cycling test is an FTP test, and you're also going to pretty much die there. It's not a ramp test, though. It's like a proper FTP test, which in 2021, most people aren't doing anymore. They're doing ramp tests for the most part. And actually in 2021, most people aren't doing that either. They're just letting the platforms go ahead and figure out their FTP from their existing rides and intervals and workouts. Certainly you can do this every once in a while, but most people are just having the platforms do that. So in any case, leg recovery test, though, is pretty cool. This has you jump a couple times, and it basically measures how high you're jumping. And then from there, it'll figure out if your legs are recovered. So that's something that platforms and software can't easily do like they can for the FTP test or for the VO2 max side of it. Now, there's another way you can do recovery on the Grit X Pro, which was not previously there, but was on the higher end Vantage V series, Vantage V and Vantage V2, which is the ability to do Recovery Pro. So in the settings options, by default, you will be on nightly recharge setting, which is what I've been using the last little while here. And that allows me to basically to see my nightly recharge status each day, and the watch will figure out whether or not I'm fully charged or fully like ready to go from a training recovery standpoint. But you can change this over to Recovery Pro, and then once you have that there, it'll go ahead and ask you to do a test each day. And you'll basically do this 3 times a week with the chest strap, and then it'll go ahead and give you a recovery status. Again, in my case, I just did the recovery. In my case, I just did the nightly recharge status, which worked for me. But if you want that extra data, you can go ahead and use Recovery Pro instead. Okay, so coming up on number 9 here of newness, though there's actually like a ton of tiny minutia newness things that I've got in my full written review. You can check that out linked somewhere on the screen or below or something like that. You can see some of this whole list right there. But for this particular one, the new unit has sapphire glass. So you can't really like visibly tell that much between the two of them. They look basically the same visually in terms of brightness and all that kind of stuff. All seem basically the same to me. But the sapphire glass does make this more durable against scratches. So that is now added, and it's probably one of the reasons why the cost is more. Keep in mind, in the past, the GridX was about $429, and then now it's at $499 and up to $599 for the Titan edition. Also, as part of that, they've added a new backlight brightness option, though it's not quite what you think. You can go in here, choose backlight brightness, and it basically chooses whether or not it's on low or only if you press a light button. So in this case, it'll only turn on if I press this upper left-hand button, the backlight. Otherwise, by default, if you press anything, it'll turn on and kind of make that backlight more visible. In general, though, this watch has okay visibility. I know it's kind of hard to see on the camera up there and stuff, which kind of mirrors what it's like in real life. Like sometimes it's just fine, and then sometimes it's a little hard to see, especially indoors. Outdoors, I've had zero problems in rain or darkness, all that kind of stuff. It works just fine for me. Okay, so let's talk about accuracy really quickly here. Starting off with the heart rate side of it. So looking at these graphs here, if I look at indoor workouts first, for example, on this Zwift workout last night, heart rate was just fine. Like it was matching the chest strap and all the other sensors I had on within reasonable accuracy, so no problems there. The same is true as well for a Peloton workout I did. Also, again, no problems there. So when I headed outside, it was a bit more mixed. Now for all these, the GridX Pro is in green, and you can see here, it was relatively close most of the time. A couple times though, just a little bit like bubbly, just like not really perfectly on. Something that I saw with the GridX a year ago, as well as the Polar Vantage V2 a year ago, and it's all the same sensor, so it kind of makes sense that I'm seeing that sort of like variability that I wouldn't really want to see. But it's not horrible by any means there. If I look at this interval run here, you can see it struggled during the warm-up a bit. That first 15 minutes or so wasn't quite on top of it. And even some of the main intervals, you can see between number 1 and number 2, it sort of missed the recovery altogether, but otherwise was fine for the rest of the intervals. So I wouldn't say this is like a huge miss, just kind of like a meh, not quite nailed. And it's very similar to this interval workout I did here, this kind of hill repeat short interval workout. Overall, it's not bad. And again, these are like 30 to 60 second intervals, so they're pretty tough to do optically. And you can see some of the other sensors struggle a little bit as well. In this case, there's like 1 or 2 in there that the GridX Pro totally missed, but the majority of them have got the general gist of it. And I think the key thing to remember here, though, is the fact that with this watch, you can pair it to a chest strap. So if you're doing this sort of workout, then maybe it's better off with this particular watch to pair it with a chest strap and just use that instead. On the GPS side of accuracy, mostly pretty good. A few little bobbles that the other units didn't see. In most of these cases, I had both an Apple Watch SE as well as a Garmin Forerunner 745, so kind of similar price range on the Garmin side of it. And in general, there was cases where the GridX Pro was just a little bit offset everyone else. Not all the time, just like for little tiny slices throughout the run. So you see the section right here where it's just kind of off the side in green for no particular reason. Yet more difficult portions of that run, it nailed it just fine. So not terribly sure what's going on there. On this run here, that was relatively straightforward, including some bridges and stuff like that. It nailed that, so no problems there. And then in the trees, you can see, by and large, it was good. There was just one little section where it was kind of off by, my guess is like 15 to 20 meters. So we're not talking a huge amount here. Overall, this wouldn't be something I'm super concerned about, but it's not quite as sharp as some of the other units that I've been testing. Okay, so last but not least, what is coming to the older watches of these new features? I know everyone's probably wondering, like, do I get these new features or not? And the simple answer is, if you're on the Polar Vantage V2, the answer is yes across the board, mostly because you already have most of these features. They kind of came down from the V2 to this, but there are new ones in here, and you're getting those as well on October 20th, and a firmware update for the Vantage V2. If you've got the Polar Grid X, the original one, then here is the list of features that you're getting. It's a big list, but I'll kind of boil it down and explain what you're not getting, which is probably easier. The things you're not getting is the cycling and leg recovery test and the orthostatic test, as well as the reverse route features, nor that elevation profile that you saw there, both prior and during your workout. So that's kind of like the core things you're not getting there. So everything else you get for the most part, that is software-wise. And again, that full list is somewhere on the screen right now. Now, if you step back, you kind of realize what Polar has done here. They've essentially made their GridX Pro the same feature-wise as their Vantage V2. In the past, there was always discrepancy between the Vantage V2 being like higher feature-wise, but it didn't really look as cool. It's kind of like a plasticky look compared to the GridX, which I think looked great. Now they've sort of resolved that. They're the same feature set, which I like. I'm actually a a fan of the idea of saying, hey, if you want to pay more money for fancier materials and stuff like that, then go forth. And if you don't, then that's fine too. You'll still get the same features on both watches, just simply at a lower price point. So with that, thanks for watching. Again, if you found this video interesting or useful, just simply whack that like button at the bottom or hit subscribe for plenty more sports technology goodness. October is very strong on the sports technology side. So lots of stuff coming, definitely lots of stuff coming. With that, have a good one.